In 1966, a slim, strange little book was published by an even stranger man. Its title? Well, it was the Adam and Eve story. And its claim was that the Earth wipes out all of civilization every 6,500 years with no warning. There are massive earthquakes, 1,000-mile-per-hour winds, and tsunamis taller than skyscrapers. And in a single day, the entire crust of the Earth, it completely shifts, turning continents to dust and oceans to glass. The man behind that theory was Dr. Chan Thomas, a respected electrical engineer who once designed missile guidance systems and later wrote about ESP, UFO propulsion, and get this, childbirth. Naturally, when his book dropped, the CIA swooped in and they classified it. Because, of course they did. For decades, the Adam and Eve story was considered a dangerous lost text. Maybe suppressed because, it got too close to a terrifying truth. Or maybe because it was just totally bonkers. Then in 2013, after a FOIA request, the book was quietly declassified, or so they said. Only 57 pages were released. No peer-reviewed studies, no warning signs of doom, just strange diagrams, poetic terror, and one really disturbing prediction. We are overdue for the next pole shift.
Knock, knock, who's there? Instant death by supersonic wind.
Zorgo, I am trying to explain a potential civilization-ending cataclysm here.
Perfect! Then it's the ideal time to tell them. If they want the real deep cuts on this stuff, head to our Patreon.
Well, that is right. We've got exclusive episodes, extended interviews, early access, and full declassified archives linked in the video description below.
Plus, if the pole shift does happen, patrons will be the first to get on the survival map. It doesn't exist yet.
Right, so on paper, the Adam and Eve story is just a quirky little book by a man named Dr. Chan Thomas, an electrical engineer who worked at Bell Labs in McDonnell Douglas during the Cold War. A man fluent in aeronautics, electromagnetism, and apparently prophecies. In 1966, he published a book claiming that Earth periodically undergoes a rapid geographic pole shift, not magnetic, geographic. In less than 24 hours, the entire outer shell of the planet slips over a molten inner layer, rotating continents like a loose orange peel. And the result? Complete and total annihilation. Supersonic winds, global tsunamis, earthquakes so violent that mountains liquefy. And the kicker is that according to Thomas, this happens every 6,500 years or so. And then the CIA goes and classifies everything. Not just that, they snapped it up the same year that it was published. For decades, the book disappeared from shelves, leaving behind only rumors, half quotes, and, grainy PDFs on conspiracy forums on the internet. When it was finally declassified in 2013, the 57-page document reignited a firestorm online. But skeptics quickly pointed out there was no missing manuscript. Those blank pages people were panicking over were just the backs of title sheets. There was nothing to see here. So, what gives? If the science is so shaky, if Thomas's ideas are so easily dismissed, why did the CIA bother classifying the thing at all? Why did they do it even in the first place?
Maybe they just didn't want the public confusing cataclysms with constipation. Happens more often than you'd think.
Officially, nobody knows why the book was classified. Some speculate that it was because Thomas was involved in UFO propulsion research, ESP experiments, and anti-gravity theories, things that the government definitely wasn't interested in having people know anything about during the 1960s. Others think that it was just, bureaucratic noise, part of a background file on a highly eccentric genius. But here's the real twist. While the mainstream scientific community has always dismissed Thomas's mechanisms as pseudoscience, some of his themes, global floods, rapid climate events, magnetic anomalies, do have precedent in modern geology. Which leads us to a very uncomfortable question. What if the science is not totally wrong? What if the mechanism is flawed, but what if the outcome is real? Because Earth's past is littered with mysterious die-offs, sudden freezes, sunken cities, and inexplicable myths. And Dr. Thomas was not the first person to notice any of this.
He was just the first to say it with charts, diagrams, and a complete disregard for peer review.
Now, once you strip away the scientific scorn and bureaucratic red tape, you're left with something both fascinating and unsettling. A vision of Earth not as, a stable haven, but as a death trap on a timer. Dr. Chan Thomas wasn't alone in thinking this way. His theory borrows heavily from Charles Hapgood, who in the 1950s proposed the Earth crust displacement hypothesis, the idea that the entire crust can shift over the planet's molten mantle. This concept caught the attention of none other than Albert Einstein, who wrote in support of Hapgood's initial work, saying, "A physical mechanism of dislocation of the crust is conceivable." But Hapgood later walked back that entire timeline. Thomas, however, did not. In the Adam and Eve story, Thomas proposes a molten layer just 60 to 120 miles below the Earth's surface. Under normal conditions, electromagnetic forces keep it semi-solid, but every few millennia, that balance is disrupted, and the result is a sudden crustal slip. Not in centuries, not in decades, in hours.
So, Earth hits Control-Alt-Delete, and the blue screen of death is 2 miles of ocean screaming across Kansas.
Well, it's pretty horrifying. Thomas's catastrophe reads like mythological poetry laced with trauma, and he describes 1,000-mile-per-hour winds, oceans crashing over the mountains, temperatures dropping 180 degrees in a single day. Mammoths froze mid-chew with buttercups in their mouths. And here's where it gets really, really weird. Thomas points to flood myths from nearly every culture around the globe. Noah, Gilgamesh, Vishnu, Nuhu. He argues these aren't metaphor, but folk memory of real-world ending disasters. Even Dr. Robert Ballard, the oceanographer who found the Titanic, told National Geographic that ancient flood myths could align with the Black Sea deluge, a real event which was dated to around 5,600 BCE. Then there's the Sphinx. According to Boston geologist Dr. Robert Schock, erosion patterns at the base suggest exposure to sustained rainfall, which hasn't occurred in the Sahara for, thousands of years. Which would mean The Sphinx is older than Egyptian civilization. Much older.
Well, next you tell me it was built by Atlantean astronauts trying to warn us with limestone emojis.
Actually, Thomas did imply that. He also referenced the Piri Reis map, showing an ice-free Antarctic coast in the 1500s. The Yonaguni Monument, a submerged structure off Japan, some say is man-made. The Eye of the Sahara, possibly the lost city of Atlantis. And linguistic ties between Polynesian, Egyptian, and Mayan dialects implying a single global proto-civilization. Even Genesis, he claims, isn't allegory. It's a survivor's log. The Tree of Life? Well, that's a lost mother continent, according to Chan. And according to him, the serpent in the story is actually the ocean itself. Adam and Eve, well, they're not the first humans. According to him, they're just the first after the last reset.
Oh, great! So the Garden of Eden was beachfront property until the tectonic Airbnb canceled the lease.
Listen, the internet is full of theories about Chan Thomas. Was he a suppressed genius? Was he a prophetic engineer? Was he just a loopy, mystic in a lab coat? But lost in all of this noise are critical questions that most never ask. And they just might change how we see the entire theory. The first question is this. If Earth's crust can really shift 90 degrees in hours, where's the geological evidence for that? Crustal displacement on a global scale would leave unmistakable scars. Mega tsunami deposits, jagged fault lines, instant fossilization layers. And yet, no such global signature seems to exist. Nobody's found anything like that. Yes, we have found flood layers. We've found flash-frozen animals. That part is true. But these are localized, not universal. And what about human history? Wouldn't a global catastrophe erase all records? Yet civilizations like Göbekli Tepe and Jericho show long-term occupation with no signs of instant obliteration. Could Thomas have mistaken regional upheaval for a planet-wide event?
Maybe the Earth does shift, but only after a few drinks and a breakup.
Right. And question number 2 is, why did Thomas fixate on 6,500 years? Why not 12,000 years like the Younger Dryas theory? Thomas's timeline contradicts the more widely discussed Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which places a massive extinction event around 11,500 years ago. He dates his cataclysm to around 4,500 BCE, conveniently close to Noah's flood, according to biblical chronologies. But there's no radiometric evidence tying a planetary reset to that date. So why did he choose it? Was it to fit flood myths into a biblical narrative, or was it the opposite, using religious texts to retrofit a geological cycle? Either way, it raises a question. Is Thomas doing science, or is he constructing scripture? Question number 3. Why was the CIA interested in this man at all? Thomas worked on missile guidance, anti-gravity propulsion, and even ESP. Now, we know that some of those things, like ESP, were definitely things, remote viewing, all of those kind of things definitely were things the CIA really was interested in. But they didn't classify his book because of the pole shift theory. They may have just scooped up his paper while running background checks. In fact, the declassified file includes a shopping list, magazine clippings, and blueprints for a UFO propulsion device. So, did they believe him? Or were they, just cleaning out somebody's desk?
I, too, have been classified by the government, mostly as a public nuisance.
You are starting to be a nuisance right here and right now. Can I just say one thing? My co-host is when his comments completely throw me off what I'm trying to say sometimes. But anyway, question number 4 here. If pole shifts are real, why isn't mainstream science more alarmed by the magnetic anomalies that we do observe? The magnetic field is weakening. The poles are moving. The South Atlantic anomaly is growing. But according to geophysicists, this doesn't spell crustal doom. It's just a slow magnetic reversal. The last magnetic pole flip happened 780,000 years ago, and we're still here. So where's the link between magnetic drift and crustal collapse? Thomas never proves the connection. He simply asserts it. Which brings us to our 5th question. What if the real danger isn't geological at all, but psychological? Thomas's writing style is, pretty apocalyptic. It's lyrical, it's terrifying, it's weird. His language evokes biblical wrath, white-hot liquid fire, oceans screaming, civilization reduced to ash and mud. It's vivid, but, is it science or is it trauma? A subconscious fear of collapse dressed up in scientific jargon. In this light, the Adam and Eve story becomes less of a hypothesis and more of a modern myth, encoded in the language of Cold War paranoia. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it kind of resonates so deeply with some people. Now, Chan Thomas imagined civilization ending in a global crustal shift, but Genesis hints at something even more catastrophic. Not the end of a civilization, but the end of a world. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. And that's Genesis 1:1 through 1:2. Formless and void. Tohu v'bohu. In Hebrew, the same phrase used later in Jeremiah 4:23 to describe a world reduced to ruins. I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and the heavens had no light. That's not pristine creation. This is the aftermath of judgment.
So, Genesis 1 is less let there be light and more lights back on after the crime scene's been hosed down.
According to the gap theory championed by P.H. Pember, Genesis 1:2 doesn't describe the original act of creation at all. It describes a recreation following a cosmic collapse, a divine reset, if you will. A pre-Adamic world ruled not by humans, but by species of beings that we throw under the angelic umbrella term. And when they rebelled, they were judged. The world was plunged into darkness, Genesis 1:2. The deep, or Tehom, was covering everything, and the Spirit of God hovered, ready to begin again.
So, what we're actually reading in Genesis isn't a starter, it's damage control. Earth 2.0 after the celestial boardroom got torched.
I actually don't think that idea is quite so fringe. Authors Jack Kelly and David Flynn both talked about this stuff, and I've never read anywhere in scripture that says Earth was the first domain of intelligent life. And Isaiah hints at something even older. The earth staggers like a drunkard. It falls and shall not rise again. Isaiah 24:20. Or again in Isaiah 14, where the morning star, Hallel ben Shachal, falls, cast down from the heavens to the pit. Ancient interpreters, including Jewish sages and early church fathers, identified this with a cosmic rebellion before Eden. A rebellion tied to angelic realms, possibly even planetary dominions.
Let me guess. Mars used to have some pretty amazing seaside luxury condos until some archangel blew the HOA budget on pride and particle weapons.
Well, maybe before there was such a thing as archangels, but what actually matters is this. Genesis doesn't describe the beginning of everything. It describes the beginning of us, on the rubble of something older and more terrifying. And Eden was not a paradise up in the clouds somewhere. It was a beachhead, a guarded zone on a hostile planet. It was a place where humanity was placed after something had gone terribly wrong in the cosmos. He placed at the east of the garden cherubim and a flaming sword to guard the way to the tree of life. Genesis 3:24.
Yeah, I just did see this god of yours posting an angelic kill squad at the gate of a park. Sounds like there was some serious goods or, some serious dangers, some goodies, something awesome that he was protecting or prohibiting this, Adam and Eve of yours from with extreme prejudice.
Right, but maybe their exile was perceived as punishment, and in a way it was. But maybe it was also a protection. Remember, Genesis states the following in Genesis 3:22 through 24. Then the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, in knowing good and evil. Now, lest he reach out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever." Therefore, the Lord God sent him out from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Now, this passage indicates that the expulsion was not only punishment, but a form of protection to prevent humanity, now fallen and morally compromised, from gaining immortality in a state of rebellion. So God in his mercy removed access to the tree of life, initiating exile as a redemptive delay, not annihilation. In any case, when Adam and Eve fall, they don't just lose access to God, they lose access to memory. They're cast into a world that's already scarred and already broken. And they're forced to survive in that new world without knowing what came before. Which makes Chan Thomas's idea of pole shifts and resets feel, less outlandish and more like incomplete. Because the Bible actually agrees there are resets, but they're not natural cycles, they are judgments. The heavens and earth that now exist are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment. That's 2 Peter 3:7.
Translation: the next reset isn't tectonic, it could be terminal.
Well, even after the flood, which Thomas treats as geological, was judicial. It came not because of shifting crusts, but because the watchers defiled the earth. Genesis 6, 1 Enoch 7 through 10, God purged it, and then he swore never to use water again. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. Genesis 9:11, which means if there's another reset coming, it won't be with water. It'll be with fire.
So what's worse, getting wiped out by 1,000 mile per hour winds or surviving just long enough to realize you're toast?
I'd say they're both pretty horrific, but the deepest danger isn't the physical reset. It's the spiritual blindness that precedes it. That blindness is described in Romans 1, where men suppress the truth in unrighteousness, exchanging the glory of the immortal God for images, lies, and pride. It's the same as Eden. Same as Babel. Pretty much the same as now.
Every reset has the same trigger. Humanity staring into the divine saying, "Hey, we've got this," right before tripping over your own hubris.
Well, pride does come before a fall, man.
I'm not a man.
Anyway, maybe the Adam and Eve of Genesis weren't naive villagers, post-apocalypse. Maybe they were appointed to steward a world that had already fallen once. And their failure in the garden wasn't just disobedience, it was a domino in a cosmic rebellion that began with the angels long before. The problem with Thomas's book isn't that it's too extreme, it's that it's not extreme enough. He missed the war behind the crust, the real story, the ancient rebellion, the fall of other intelligent species, the destruction of pre-Adamic worlds, the Garden of Eden, the trial of humanity. And he missed what comes next. The elements will melt with fervent heat. Sounds like a pretty horrible end to everything, right? But we are waiting for a new heaven and a new earth. 2 Peter 3:12-13. Listen, for those who make the Lord their refuge, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, judgment is never the final word. From the ashes of every collapse, he preserves a remnant. From every exile, he leads a return. His covenant is not erased by catastrophe, and his promises are not undone by cosmic resets. The flood had an ark, the fire will have a deliverer, and Psalm 91 declares, 1,000 may fall at your side, but it shall not come near you, because you have made the Most High your dwelling. The world may stagger and burn, but those who trust in the Holy One of Israel are anchored not in the stability of the earth, but in the unshakable mercy of the one who holds history in his hand and who promises in Isaiah 65:17, "Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered." Judgment may cleanse, but God restores and he resurrects. And that's our hope. Now, if you made it this far, thank you. This kind of deep dive isn't easy to produce. In fact, it's been almost 2 weeks since the last video that I made, that Zorgo and I made. But you know what? It's worth it. For bonus content, early access, extended interviews, and a growing community of curious minds, I'd like to invite you to join us on Patreon. Links are in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who's ready to question everything. And remember, you are invited to join the rebellion against this present darkness. I'm Will Blesh, and this is the Watcher Files.